welcome back to my channel, and for this video I was thinking of doing more of a video looking at some books I would recommend as good winter reads. But before I actually got onto that, before I kind of started looking at the 6 books I've got in front of me, I'll do a bit of housekeeping first, get that out of the road. So if you are enjoying my channel, if you enjoy my videos, if you can click on that subscribe button, click on that notification bell, leave some likes, leave some comments, it's always really appreciated. And if you'd like to support the channel further, I will post a link to the channelscoffee.com page in the description bar below and in a pinned comment in the comments section. So with that out of the road, with that done and dusted, on to the actual main topic of this video. So these are 6 books that I would definitely recommend for reading during the winter. So again, with the nights drawing in, with the weather getting colder, it's getting wetter, and you just want to kind of stay at home and be curled up in a blanket and be nice, warm and cosy. These are books that I would definitely recommend if you're wanting just to kind of curl up and have a good something to read, a good book. You probably would not go amiss with any of these books. And I have to admit, like personally, I do tend to like books that have a bit of a kind of gothic element or a bit of a kind of maybe a darker streak to them. But then again, if you're going back to like the Victorian period, even back then people liked to read ghost stories over the winter, especially at Christmas. So hopefully that kind of fits in with the theme of the books that I'm going to be suggesting. It certainly does fit in with the first book that I'm going to suggest. It's probably a bit of an obvious suggestion because it is a book that a lot of people read at this time of year, and it just happens to be The Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. And this is actually a copy that my best friend got me. I think it was last year she got me this one, or it might have been the year before, and she got me this as my You're a Book of Flood book for that year. And I just kind of love, it's just the binding of it, it just has that very Victorian feel, just that very oldie worldy kind of feel to it. And it does even have the gilt edgings on the actual edge of the paper. So yeah, as most people know, it is a kind of Christmas staple, it's a winter staple. It very much does fit in with the whole Victorian idea of telling ghost stories and scary stories, especially at Christmas. And yeah, and that was something I did actually have to explain to my mum one year, because I think we were actually sitting watching the animated version of A Christmas Carol. It was the one with Jim Carrey in it, and my mum just could not understand why it was scary, and me and my dad had to explain to her the whole Victorian tradition of sitting and telling ghost stories. And I have to admit, even as a kid watching, it didn't matter, I think it really mattered what version of, or what movie version that I was watching, when it got to the Ghost of Christmas Future, or the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, is the one that's kind of essentially dressed like the Grim Reaper. I always found him to be the creepiest ghost, and I always kind of got slightly no, I wouldn't really say freaked out, but I always kind of found him the creepiest. But again, that was the point. So yeah, I kind of thought I'd get the obvious suggestion out of the road. So that's A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. And maybe kind of following on from that a wee bit, I do have The Woman in Black by Susan Hill. And I know there has been a couple of movies out about this, and I think there's been a stage play as well. And I did see the version that had Daniel Radcliffe in it, and I have to admit I really enjoyed that movie. It's actually it's just one of those movies that just, it was just very, very suspenseful, very kind of always had you on the edge of your seat. But for those who maybe haven't read the book, you might not realise from the movie that the book itself does actually start on Christmas Eve, and starts with, again, the whole Christmas tradition from that time of telling ghost stories. And I think it's like, if I remember correctly, it does, because with them all sitting around telling ghost stories, that's what sparks Arthur Kip's like remembrance of the events that took place. So Arthur Kip is the main character. He is the one that's played by Daniel Radcliffe in the most recent movie version. And again, if you like reading like Victoriana ghost stories, especially at this time of year, definitely one that I would recommend. Okay, it's not the thickest of books, it's not the kind of the longest of books, but it's definitely worth sitting reading, and just probably one of those good books that you could probably sit up on Christmas Eve, kind of wrapped up in a blanket with a nice hot drink, something to eat, and just read it in one night. And one that I'm not too sure how many people have actually heard of this one, but it's The Seal Woman's Gift by Sally Magnuson. So for those who maybe don't know, Sally Magnuson is actually a news anchor, newsreader on BBC Scotland, and her dad was Magnus Magnuson. And so again, it's like she is Scottish Icelandic, and the whole premise of this book is that it's telling the taking of about 400 people from Iceland by Algerian pirates back in 1627. Actually, I don't think it's an event that really many people know about, but it essentially kind of follows the wife of the minister, and she's one of the one who is her and the minister, and a lot of people that they know and who live in the nearby area are the ones who are taken, and essentially follows her story and how she deals with what's happened, and essentially you catch glimpses of what happens to all the other people who are taken as well. So if you're wanting to maybe read something that deals with an historical event, some historical fiction, you could probably kind of treat yourself to this. And it is it was actually shortlisted for the HWA Awards. I think it was for the debut crown. So it was shortlisted for that. And I think it has proven fairly popular. She has brought out other books since then. So I probably have to try and see if I can look up her other books and maybe have a wee read of them, because I quite enjoyed that one. And one of the books that I will probably always go back to and read again, and I probably will always read his books, because I have to have most of his books up on my shelf, and that the book that I would suggest for this, for reading over winter and Christmas, is The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. So I think this is more one of his kind of children books, or one of the ones that he's written that's geared more towards children. But again, it's one of those good books that you could read it at any age and appreciate it and find something in it, and just that's that kind of darkness to it. There's very much a kind of feel of folklore and mystery, the gothic, not really knowing what's happening, and yeah, and very much when you get to the end, you are very, very much left sitting thinking about what's happened, and essentially I could probably try to come to terms with the novel itself, but it's just done so well. And again, it's probably one of those good books that you could easily curl up under a blanket and just sit and lose yourself in. It's just one of those books that it's just such a good story, so well written, and yeah, one that I would definitely recommend. And one that's again probably quite fitting for this time of year, and again I think this might have actually been another Yola Book of Flood book that my best friend got me. And this is one book that has actually really stayed with me. Now, it's long overdue a reread. And it's A Snow Child by Eowyn Ivey. And the whole premise of this one is that there's a couple who are living in Alaska. They're trying to get away from everything. They're trying to get away from life in general and essentially try to find themselves a wee bit, and they want a child, but for whatever reason they can't have one. And one night, I think it's the night of the first snow, they go out and they build a snow child. And one of the things that the main female character, who's called Mabel, is obsessed with is a Russian fairy tale called The Snow Maiden. And it essentially very much kind of follows Jack and Mabel, who are the married couple, and a discovery of this young girl who they're never too sure whether she is a magical creature or if she's just a strange child that they found. And again, at the end in itself is very enigmatic, very mysterious, and it just sits with you. You just sit and you think about what has happened and you try and figure it out. And I found it kind of like, it must be like kind of even weeks later, I'll still go back and trying to think through the story and try to figure it out and try to kind of come to terms with what I'd read. But it's the way that Eowyn Ivey has written it, it's just such a good story, so well written, and one that I would always try and go back and reread at this time of year, especially with it being such a winter story. It's like the whole idea of winter and snow and the cold are so central to the story itself. So it just, again, very much has that winter feel to it. And the last book for this list, and I probably would recommend any of his books, but the one that I picked up is The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. And this is obviously the first book, I think it's the first book that he had published in English, and it's definitely the first one that I'd read, and I just utterly ended up falling in love with his stories, with his writing, and yeah, and I ended up buying most of his books. I've got one of his books sitting on the shelf just now. It's desperately waiting to get read. So it very much kind of centres around a young boy called Daniel and his discovery of a book that is called The Shadow of the Wind, which he found in the Cemetery of Forgotten Books. And it's like you very much have that kind of sense of the mystery, the gothic, of the unknown. And again, it's one of those stories that just draws you in and makes you want to sit and finish. And I did find that it was one of those books that I just did not want to put down, that I didn't want to stop reading it. It was just such a good read, such a good journey just going through the book. And I've kind of found that with all these other books that I've read, that they all have that sense of mystery and a sense of the gothic that just draws you on, because you just want to get to the end of the book and find out what's going on, but you don't always get the answers that you're expecting or you're wanting, but still leaves you craving more and wanting more, but still with that sense of satisfaction at the end. So those are 6 books that I would definitely recommend for reading over winter and for just sitting curled up and enjoy. And yeah, so hopefully you will all be intrigued by the books I've suggested. Hopefully you will all go off and maybe you could treat yourself to some winter reading. And hopefully you will all have enjoyed this video, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye bye.